recording nature on the farm is what I'll be speaking on. It is something that I got into by mistake. Should have never done it. Anyway, just to introduce the farm first. We're not in La Mancha. There's a very well-known Whitmuir farm just outside Peebles. Organics, brilliant restaurants, organic shop, everything. And people keep saying to me, "Oh, I've been to your restaurant." Well, no, you haven't. Anyway, so we're not organic, we're not perfect, we still use chemicals, but we do try to work with nature on the farm. Not always out of choice. Mixed farm, you can see there's grazing and some arable. The arable is not really enough to have our own tractor and machinery, so we use contractors, so it doesn't make a lot of money. I've got a leaky tractor shed, a very shiny grain shed, and a hay barn, and nowhere to have any stock. So we let the grazing to one of our neighbours. So all that's left for me to do is run tourism, holiday cottages, and in the woodlands and some of their species-rich meadows, we try and do something with nature. And some of it's successful, but the environmental programs have always been quite important to our income because we're not making it from the arable or the grazing. In the lovely days from ESA, you got a form, lots of questions, half of them we didn't answer. It was fun, you got your money. But the forms started to change over time and they became more prescriptive. You had to say for each measure in the ESA program, what changes, a variety of species did you see? Never saw any because we weren't looking for it. So I just ticked no, 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 and that was fine. But I was getting the message, somebody wants to know what we're trying to do here. And so I thought I'd better start seeing what are we doing, is there any changes? I have a background in horticulture, so it was quite easy to start monitoring some of the plants, but I hadn't got a clue about grasses, so I needed to get some volunteer help for that. You just Google who's good in grasses, invite them over, and they come up with a list of what you got. Moths, I invited somebody to come and look at the moths, and they showed me once, and they said, right, now you can do it yourself. So we had to work that. So I was up at 4:30 this morning counting moths on the farm. Some of it's great fun, some of it is a bit boring. We started, well, when I started about 20 years ago at the farm as manager, we had a few orchids and some species-rich bits, and we were just grazed by sheep, and the sheep are brilliant at finding any young orchid that's gone before you know it. We changed some things, some for the better. We've now got lots of orchids. We've lost one or two other things. So it's not always as straightforward. Lots of birds. Again, I don't know half these little brown jobs, so we've got people to count them for us. And when I started, we still had a curlew nesting on one of the arable fields. Our local badgers sorted them out, so we no longer have curlews. Lapwings, we have a few, about 4 pairs this year, it was 3 last year. We do an inordinate amount of work for the lapwings, and I must admit that I have something to say here about lapwings. When I started in Holland, this was my job working for a neighbour, milking in the middle of the field in a bucket. You never washed your wellies or anything, and you just went up to a cow and milked it where it stood. Those fields were full of lapwings, and at the time in Holland, the first lapwing egg found every year was presented to the Dutch Queen. She had it for her breakfast. After that, the rest of us were allowed to eat as many lapwing eggs as we wanted till a certain date, and then after that date, you had to leave all the lapwings eggs. So the fact that there's very few lapwings left is probably to do something with their stomach. But now at the farm, we have some what we call success stories. There's a pair of oyster catchers that nest on the hay shed roof, and they've been there for 9 years now. The chicks can never get off the roof, so I have to climb on the roof, run around with a bucket, chase them, get the chicks off the roof, and then off they go. In those 9 years, we've never got one chick past that stage. Luckily, they live up to 40 years, I'm told, so we've got another 20 odd years to get it right and breed at least 2 replacements. But it does show the kind of problems that even when you think you're doing well and you have them nesting, it doesn't mean that they're actually succeeding. But both Mr. and Mrs. Lapping and I know each other very well now, and they come and tell me when I have to bring the chicks off the shed. In winter, we have bird seed plots, we do additional feeding, we have, some years we get starlings coming in huge numbers, but when there's snow lying, we have up to 4,000 little brown jobs that come to feeding, and this is our very special feeding method. Wine boxes nailed onto fence posts. It's great. You make sure that they face away from the prevailing wind. The only problem is with that is that when it snows, it's always from the opposite direction, the east, and they all fill up with snow, so you have to keep going around clearing them. But it is very successful, huge numbers of birds, and we have, again, another volunteer to look after the little brown jobs to see. There's a British Trust for Ornithology man who comes and rings lots of birds, monitors, tells us what's there, tells us what we're doing. He spent ages on skylarks. In the winter we have flocks of sort of 200 skylarks on our stubble, and he's worked out that it's black-headed gulls who keep eating the young on our farm, but we do still have skylarks, which is quite good. One of the other projects we're working with is with the Teyl de Bordes mammal group. Every spring and autumn they come and count our small mammals. We put out 60 live catch traps, voles, wood mice, all sorts of shrews get into these. They get marked, released, and then for the next few days, especially wood mice, they keep coming back into the traps because they think it's brilliant. There's a little vole there. Voles get quite tame and they'll sit on you and don't want to go. And we have huge amounts of data now. There's more data on small mammals from our farm than anywhere else in Scotland. But what do you do with the data? It doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes it's explained because there was a lot of snow in the winter. So recording just on its own doesn't produce anything. You still have to try and do something with the data, and that's the challenge that we find. Fungi, the owners quite like edible fungi, and they kept saying to me, why haven't we got any? So I got a mycologist, again, went up on Google. Local mycologist came out to tell me why we didn't have edible fungi. He got out of his car, walked 3 yards and says, there you are, there's edible fungi there. So he then went and looked further, and after a few years we had about 300 species of fungi. And I read somewhere that at 500 species you had a nationally important site. So I thought, well, that's a target. So I kept inviting mycologists from Kew and Edinburgh to host training sessions at our farm, fill our holiday cottages with mycologists. And we're now at over 600 species. And it's, so we're past our 500, we should be nationally important. And so I said, right, what do I do now that we're nationally important? There's nothing that anybody wants to do with our fungi. I could go and kill them all tomorrow with lots of fertiliser. Till there is a Scottish checklist for fungi, nobody's going to look at anything on fungi. So it's a rather frustrating thing that after all the work we've done with fungi, it doesn't mean anything. We have some very nice fungi, and therefore we keep looking after them. We even found a new species on our farm, just on a beach edge. Had never been found except for in Finland, but the guy who found it in Finland hadn't described it yet, so therefore we can claim it was new. It's now been found in several other places in Scotland, but again, back to Google, found somebody to look at lichens, mosses, liverworts. They have all been recorded now, and we're getting into crazy numbers. We're now at about 1,400 plus species at the farm, and it doesn't always help you making decisions, because you know too much sometimes when you decide which bit am I going to plough up. But we keep soldiering on. Moths, although it's 251, I've managed to count now, and it's been quite a learning curve. In the beginning, I hadn't got a clue what the hell I was doing, but it's been quite interesting. And we make a point of tweeting about moths and other things. So if you like moths, follow us on Twitter. And while we're on Twitter, I was sort of seeing things about things happening in Brussels, about the way some people were thinking that the future should be, and it's this result-based agri-environment schemes. It's nothing new. It's been trialled in all sorts of countries: Scandinavia, Germany, Holland, Greece. For about 20 years this has been going on. But it is looking, I mean, if you listen to Michael Gove, there's ScotLink came out with research about a week and a half ago saying that 77% of Scots want farmers to be paid for doing things for nature. So it is a real thing, and the bit that Roger might be pleased with is the bottom bit. Farmers are free to decide how to manage the land and livestock. No prescriptive dates, but farmers take a risk. So it's not without its challenge. There's 3 European Union funded pilots at the moment, one in England, one in Romania, and the very obvious combination of Spain and Ireland. The Romanian one is very much for small hay plots, low impact machinery or hand cutting, but some of it is still very relevant. And I think, Lynn, when you were talking about some of the things you're trying to do, the Romanian examples of this mosaic farming is very much like what happens in some of the crofts in this country. But again, see what the Romanians are saying at the bottom: prescriptive mowing dates are not good for biodiversity. What Roger was saying is very true. In England, it's run by Natural England and the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority. There is both bird seed plots on sort of wader projects, and there is species-rich projects. And there is a wealth of information on both Twitter and Facebook, and if you look at Natural England and Yorkshire Dales websites, tons of stuff. And one of the things that the Natural England and Yorkshire Dales has come up with, which I found was quite interesting, is that where the farmers were doing birdseed plots beside insect plots, because this new system pays you for results, farmers were trying to, or tending to spend more chemicals, because you have to get a huge crop to get your bonus. So something there needs tweaking. This is one of the Irish farmers' examples. You can see there, score 10 out of 10, you get a high payment rate. The 7 out of 10 drops quite dramatically. So there is a push for getting results in these systems. In the Netherlands, a lot of the egg schemes are done in huge cooperatives. There's 40 big cooperatives, and not all of it is perfect, but it does mean that there's a lot less government employees doing paperwork. It's actually the cooperatives getting paid to do the work. It's always better if the farmers get the money than the government. But, Yorkshire Dales Natural Things and the European Union have been absolutely brilliant giving me information. I could speak for another 2 hours with the amount of information I've had for them. Sadly, I'm not allowed to. So thank you very much.